Welcome to Design 30. My name is Jason Bilyeu, and in this podcast, I provide design strategies and tools to improve creativity, innovation, and overall design confidence. Creativity is much broader and more universal than what people typically consider the artistic fields. We think of creativity as using our imagination to create something new in the world. Creativity comes into play whenever you have the opportunity to generate new ideas, solutions, or approaches, and we believe everyone should have access to that resource. This is a quote from the book Creative Confidence by Tom and David Kelly, and I thought it was a good way to lead into this episode because I'm going to be talking about some resources that I use as a mechanical engineer that help improve my own creativity. They help me generate new ideas. And for the most part, these websites are actually really big on the solution side. These are websites that you can use to actually physically create something. You can actually create something new in the world that has never existed. And that's something I often compare or often talk about with 3D printing. Is what's so cool about it is you can come up with an idea, design it, and then literally in minutes, you have something in your hand that potentially is the first time something like that has ever existed in the world, which is pretty crazy. Something of that shape, that specific design that you just came up with has never ever existed in the world before until you just made it. So I'm going to dive into 5 websites that I think are essential for people to use if you're a product designer or if you're a mechanical engineer, if you're an industrial designer. I think these websites can be useful for definitely all of those people, maybe even more. I think they're very easy to use, they're very user-friendly, and there's just a ton of resource. And these aren't the only ones. I'll say it right now, like there's a ton of websites out there, tons of resources for anyone who is designing, creating, and building physical products. Anyone who's designing products that you want to ship to customers, products that you want people to actually be able to put their hands on, right? Like these websites might not be, or at least not all of them will be useful if you're designing software, if you're designing apps or websites. But for anyone who's designing a physical product, these websites are definitely a must. The first website I want to talk about is what I usually call, or have lately been calling, basically the Toys R Us for engineers. Or this website is to engineers what Toys R Us was to kids in the 1990s. It's just full of all sorts of incredible stuff, and you can just get lost for hours looking through this website. And this website is McMaster-Carr. So essentially what McMaster-Carr is, it feels a lot like a hardware store on the internet, but it's a massive hardware store. There's almost any possible thing you could think of on this website. So that's why it's so much fun as an engineer, especially as a mechanical engineer, is there's just literally a million different mechanical little things to look and explore through. There's the big thing is fasteners. A lot of people will buy their fasteners through this website. This is what I do at work a lot. We buy a lot of our fasteners through here. They have almost everything you could possibly want. They also have adhesives and tapes. They have tools for welding, brazing, and soldering. They have a whole section on pipe and tubing, hose fittings, power transmission. So you're looking at bearings and bushings and U-joints. I mean, it's literally, if you're a mechanical engineer right now, you know what I'm talking about. Like all of these things, it's so cool. They have gears you can buy, belts you can buy, pulleys, sprockets, all sorts of different stuff. They have hydraulics, pneumatics, linear motion, such as like springs and actuators, You can even find pressure gauges. I know you can buy things like calipers on here. You can buy a lot of other things for sealing. So O-rings. O-rings is another very common thing that I've bought off this website multiple times. You have ways of controlling flow and level control. So pumps and valves, mixers and vibrators and switches and indicators and gauges and sights. There's just, the list literally goes on and on and on. I can just keep scrolling through here. You have pressure and temperature control, filtering, electrical lighting, raw materials, fabricating, braiding and polishing. So you can get your files here. You can get a bunch of different sanding abrasives here, brushes and deburring tools. So McMaster-Carr is... I love it. It's one of the websites I go to the most as far as, especially for fasteners. As I mentioned, there's all sorts of different types of fasteners. You can get your just standard, different steel fasteners. You can get plastic fasteners. You can get fasteners that are metric. You can get fasteners that are inch. You got shoulder screws, thumb screws. There's screws that are great if you're looking for something that's cosmetic. If you're looking for a captive screw in a panel, something like that, they literally have it. They've got threaded studs. They have the whole kits of fasteners you can buy. So, yeah, McMaster-Carr is, if you're especially a mechanical engineer, anyone who's building something physical, I would say McMaster-Carr is basically your spot to go. And one of the other cool things that they do is it's not cheap, but everything you order from McMaster-Carr will almost always come next day. And you do have to pay for that shipping. So it's better to do a larger order and not buy a few screws at a time. But it'll come next day. The only thing that I know of that doesn't come next day is magnets. If you order magnets, because they can't fly those for what, I'm not even sure what the reason is. I should look into that. But for whatever reason, you can't transport magnets via air, so they have to go via ground. And so magnets take a little bit longer. But everything else that I've ordered on this website will come the next day. And even post-COVID, right, where something like Amazon Prime, it's not really 2 days shipping anymore, right? We all know that. It's more like a week nowadays. And, you can tell you're spoiled when you're frustrated about something going from 2 days to a week. But with McMaster-Carr, I haven't noticed any issues. And they're still delivering most of the stuff the next day, which is pretty awesome, especially when you're building something and you forgot to order a screw, or something breaks, or there's something that you've learned and you want to rapidly prototype it. Being able to get that next day can be incredible. It can be obviously a huge time saver. So McMaster-Carr, it's a really simple website. It's really easy to use. Oh, and one more thing with McMaster-Carr. For not quite everything, but almost every component they also have a CAD model of that component. So you can design a whole product out of McMaster parts and then download all of the CAD models and put it all together right there. So that's another huge advantage, I would say, to this website, where you're not having to go to some random like grab CAD and look for CAD of something that you're hoping somebody else made and upload it to that website, right? It's all right there. They're all really, accurate, well done CAD models. So that's McMaster-Carr. Can't recommend it enough. It is the Toys R Us for engineers on the internet. Absolutely love it. The next website is called Send Cut Send, and this is one that I actually just learned about a little while ago. And well, I guess I'd seen it probably a year or two ago, and I for some reason it just didn't seem like a legitimate website to me for whatever reason. Maybe the name kind of threw me off a little bit, but it's actually pretty incredible. So what the website does, as the name infers, is you send them a file for a sheet metal part. They do they do sheet metal parts at Send Cut Send, and they send it to them on their website. Basically, you can pick what you want done to it. You want it laser cut, and then you want it bent, and you want some inserted like PEMs or a threaded stud or something inserted in the sheet metal, and then you can even get it powder coated, and then they send it back to you. And all of this, it typically is less than 2 weeks, and you can have orders, they all start at $30. So you can order, I've had times you order multiple parts, and it's still only, I guess it's $29 is what they advertise. So it's really a really inexpensive way to get sheet metal parts prototyped and shipped to you in a matter of, it's usually less than 2 weeks, I believe. They might, depending on how many order, that might push out a little bit, or if it's a more complicated part. But yeah, so they offer all sorts of different materials. On the materials side, they offer, ABS, ACM panel, acrylic, multiple different types of aluminum. They have some Baltic birch plywood, 1075 blue temper spring steel, brass, clipboard, corkboard, galvanized steel. They have titaniums, 316 steel, and 304 stainless steel. So all sorts of different materials that basically, for the most part, cover everything that you would most likely want to get made out of a sheet metal or just a sheet sort of piece, because they also have plastics, Delrin, G10, things like that. They have copper, carbon fiber, which I haven't got any of that carbon fiber yet, but I'm really curious to try that one out. And it's not all just laser cutting, right? They offer a lot of different services. So they have laser cutting, I think, is their big one. But then they also offer a sheet metal bending, which is really nice, as I mentioned. They offer anodizing, deburring of those things, plating, powder coating. So some really helpful post finishing operations that they offer. And they also have some CNC routing. They do water jet cutting for a few specific materials. And then, like I said, they do bending and forming. And they'll even they'll put some taps in your sheet metal if you want that. They can tap a few holes. Really useful website for anything sheet metal or sheets of plastic, anything like that. I can't recommend enough. It's really, really good way to prototype. You get parts fast, and they're really, really inexpensive. And I think the way they pull that off is you upload the file, right? You have to export a DXF or some sort of flat pattern of your part, upload it, and you actually do a lot of the programming in a way. You tell the system where the bend lines are and how far to bend it and the material thickness and all these things. So you're kind of taking over the programmer side for their machines, and then their machines, they build it, spit it out, ship it to you. So it's a pretty clever business model, I think. And they have a ton of resources as well. So they have a bunch of different guidelines you can follow. They have ways to help you get started with designing these parts, and they have bending calculators, and they tell you for each material and each thickness of material, a lot of different design guidelines. So, and that is one thing, before you start trying to order parts through them, make sure you do read their guidelines, because their online software will reject your parts if you're not following their guidelines. So that's one thing. I would definitely do your homework first, read through their website, read through their guidelines and what they recommend, and then, have at it. Start ordering for anything sheet metal. Send Cut Send is an awesome website. And then the next website that I use quite frequently is called Xometry. That's XOMETRY.com. Xometry is, and this is what I use primarily for me, it's for machine parts. If I'm looking at a low quantity, let's say 2 to 5 parts, I'll often go through Xometry, or 2 to 5 units of one part. You can do you can have 10 different parts you want to order, and they give you pretty good pricing. But one of the awesome things about it is, as soon as you upload your part, it gives you instant feedback. So it'll tell you, hey, this is all the different processes you can use. So it's not just machining. I use it for machining for the most, like CNC machining. But they offer all sorts of different stuff. You can do machining, laser cutting. You can still do sheet metal through Xometry. There's a bunch of different 3D printing options you can use. So they offer a ton of different manufacturing processes. But the nice thing is that automatic quoting system. So you can upload parts to this website just to get an idea of what they're going to cost. And that can give you feedback on your design. Maybe you go back and redesign it, try to reduce costs, upload it again, and see the difference. One thing I would recommend though, if it is a more complicated part, their algorithm is going to definitely estimate that high. So you can request a custom quote, which is really nice, and they'll actually have someone go and review your part, and often that reduces the cost of the part. I've had some reduce fairly significantly. I've had some go from $5,000 for one unit, all the way down to $2,000 to $3,000. So it can be pretty helpful and actually save you a lot of money if you go through that manual quoting system. They can also do high volume production runs, and they can essentially set up be a supplier for you as a company. If you want to get all your production parts or some subset of your production parts through them, you can also set that up. And then one other really interesting thing that they offer is if you have a specific price that you want for, let's say, a group of 5 parts, and you have a very specific budget you need to hit, you can go through them and you can list those parts or give those parts to them, tell them the price you're hoping for each part, and then they list that on an internal job board with their vendor base and see if anyone will do it for that price. So that's a really helpful little option that you can do with Xometry. Work with some of their, I think it's some of their sales team. They're usually really nice to work with, really good, trying to help you out, trying to get the best prices. They're really good at communicating. You can set up meetings to learn more about what they offer. And yeah, so Xometry, it's my go-to if I'm ordering parts and I want to get good pricing. They have a decent lead time. It's usually, you can do 3 weeks for standard, or you can expedite that to 2 weeks if you want to. And then they also have an option for your parts to get made internationally, which takes, it's usually probably 4 to 5 weeks, but that also is another price reduction if price really is your driving factor. And so the way Xometry works, as far as I can tell, is they have this huge base of vendors that they've vetted, that they work with. And then you come to them with a part, you upload it to their website. They use their automatic quoting tool, this little algorithm that determines how much it's going to cost. You pick if you want it CNC machined, all your finishing processes, how many tapped holes you have, your surface finishes. For most parts, they are going to ask you if you have any sort of finishing process on there. They're going to ask you for drawings, so make sure you're still creating drawings for your parts and you can upload that. But yes, you upload it and then they give you a quote and you buy it. They just shop that out to their internal vendor base, which is really nice. One thing that they don't do is they won't connect you directly with the vendor or the machinist who made your part, which makes sense for their business model, right? They don't want you just to go around them and just start using that machine shop. But they will use the same shop. If you get really good results for one of your parts, you can tell them, like, I only want to use this person. Also, if you order a part and you really like it, they're as their default, they're going to go back to that same shop every time for that same part. So unless you don't like that shop or if you have a bad experience, which has happened to me once or twice, then they will essentially never send your parts to that shop anymore. And they will find you a new one, a better one, and try to help you out that way. So Xometry, if you're doing a lower quantity lower quantity on a lot of different parts, Xometry is a good way to go. You can get good pricing with good lead times, and it's a really easy, simple quoting system. And it's also a really good way to get feedback on your parts to see what kind of pricing or how expensive your parts are going to be to get made. And another website that is it's similar to Xometry, and I was using this before I was using Xometry. It's called Protolabs, and Protolabs offers a lot of the same services. They have CNC machining, 3D printing, sheet metal fabrication. They also offer some injection molding, which you can get through Xometry as well if you want to. But the difference with Protolabs is they have some incredible lead times. So you upload a part to their website and you don't upload a drawing with it. Instead, they have a little tool where it shows your part, like a 3D version of your part. And then in interface, you go through and you add all the different holes and what taps you want in each hole, different surface finishes if you want it anodized. You kind of add that all right there, and then they will also get back to you with a quote. It won't be an instant quote unless you're doing 3D printing. Those ones, they'll get back to you instantly, but if it's something like a machine part, it's usually a few hours to maybe a day before you get that quote back. But their lead times are incredible, so it's a little bit more expensive, but you can literally get a part from Proto Labs made in a day if you're willing to pay for it. And on average, I think their typical lead time is like 3 days. So there's definitely some more expense added to that, but if you're looking to get parts rapidly, you want to get them fast, and you don't need anything crazy as far as post-processing or any really tight tolerances or something like that, Proto Labs, I think, is the way to go. I've had great results. The parts are usually really high quality, and they say, I think, plus or minus 10 thou is what they guarantee, plus or minus 5 thou is what they normally hit. And I've had really good experience with them. I don't think I've ever gotten a part from them that was significantly out of tolerance or had any issues. So if you're willing to pay for it and you need a part really fast, I would say Proto Labs is definitely the way to go for that. And then the final one, this is probably a website none of you have ever heard of, I'm sure. It's called YouTube. Anyone ever heard of that one? Evidently, it has a bunch of videos that you can watch. No, but YouTube, of course, I think we all know it. But if you are a designer and you have any questions on anything, you want to know how to make something yourself, you want to learn a new software, I mean, YouTube is just incredible for all of that. So, of course, I think this is a website we should all be using. Look up tutorials, look up videos. There's so many like high quality trainings you can take just right on YouTube. So if you're trying to learn a new software, which the software I use and would recommend if you're starting your own thing is Fusion 360. It's a really solid 3D CAD software. And it's only like, if you want to use it for a business, it's only about $500 a year, which is pretty incredibly cheap compared to most 3D CAD softwares. It might sound expensive, but that's actually a really, really good price. And if you just want to learn it and you want to use it for non-business related things, you can download it and use it for free as long as you're not making any money off it. But as soon as you start using it for business, you do have to pay for it and you get a little bit more functionality out of it. But yeah, Fusion 360 is, I think, the way to go. And on YouTube, you can find tutorials for anything you want to do in that software. And so yeah, if you're doing product design, well, especially if you want to do product design and learn about, or industrial design and learn about surfacing, is surfacing in CAD software is typically one of the things people think, oof, that's pretty difficult. But I've looked at tutorials on YouTube for that, and they're incredibly helpful. It's really not too bad. So if you're an industrial designer and you're trying to improve your surfacing skills, obviously you probably know this, you probably go to YouTube, but I just had to mention YouTube is the place to go for those things. And for anything that you might want to build by hand, there's a good chance you're going to find a tutorial on how to build that or how to build something similar. So of course, don't forget about YouTube. I don't think you will, but I did just have to throw it in there because it's one of the websites that I use by far the most. And that's it. Those are the 5 websites. So just going back through all those again, there's McMastercar, or just McMaster.com, SendCutSend, which is SendCutSend.com, Xometry.com, Protolabs.com, and then finally YouTube.com. So those 5 websites I use all the time to get new parts built. You can use them as tools to do quoting, like I mentioned on Xometry, and figure out how to get cost reductions. You can look at McMaster-Carr just for ideas and just see all of the different little mechanical pieces that exist out there, all the different types of fasteners and washers. It's actually just a nice place to go to get ideas and just scroll through it. So yeah, those websites, I think if you're building anything physical, anything that people physically interact with, I think those are the websites. If you're a mechanical engineer, especially, you probably know about them already, but if not, go check them all out. I think they're going to be really useful. And if you're someone who's just getting into this, you're a hobbyist, you're someone who's wanting to start designing and building whatever, their own hobby equipment, their own shelves, their own, I don't know, whatever the case might be. If you're building something, I think these are the websites that you're going to need. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Please give Design 30 a follow on all the social medias. If you want to hear more design content from me, or if you don't want to hear it, but rather read it, you can become a subscriber to the Design 30 Substack. And speaking of YouTube, which I mentioned earlier, Design 30 is on YouTube, so you can give me a subscribe, hit that subscribe button on YouTube. So that's where you can find me. It's pretty easy. Design 30 is all over the place at this point. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. As always, have a great week, everybody. And remember, design more, despair less. Thanks for listening.